Vanguard is a leading provider in the investment management space, but is it really just pants? We're going to look at the Vanguard platform and one of Vanguard's most popular products, its Lifestrategy. Here's a table of the most popular open-ended investment companies on the Interactive Investor platform in June 2024. And most of them are passive, with the L&G Global Technology Index at number 1, and number 2 is the Vanguard Lifestrategy 80% equity. There's some other Vanguard Life strategies in there, and what we can see is when we look at the performance of these life strategy funds, the more bonds you have, the less equity you have, the worse the performance of those funds are. You'll also note that the three global trackers from HSBC, Fidelity and Vanguard all beat the Vanguard Lifestrategy 100. It's also interesting to see the poor performance of Fundsmith. So I suppose if Vanguard is pants, at least they're clean pants, and Fundsmith is pants with a healthy skid mark on it. I'm Ian Shadrack, a qualified accountant with over 30 years experience. I look to find the best funds to invest in, and I share them with you on my YouTube channel. The Vanguard Lifestrategy product is a fund of funds that automatically rebalances to keep the same weighting over the longer term. And the Vanguard Lifestrategy 100 is 100% equities. It's got a mixture of developed world and emerging markets in it, but it has a very high weighting to the UK. I've highlighted here how the UK weighting is nearly 25%, and the problem is that leads to home country bias, and if the UK no longer has the leading companies in the whole world, then you're going to get a drag from overweighting companies that just don't really cut it anymore, and you're better off having the winners across a global market, and that would be reflected in just a standard global tracker. And this is Vanguard Lifestrategy 20, which has 20% equity exposure. The rest is either bonds in GBP or overseas bonds hedged GBP. People often equate investing risk with volatility, so a price that just moves around all over the place, and when you go to sell something, you could suffer a large loss. But actually, risk is not achieving your investing goals. And if the asset you choose to invest in has very poor performance, then you're going to live a rather meager life in retirement. Here's the performance of Vanguard Lifestrategy 20. Over 5 years, it's delivered 0.51% growth on an annualized basis, and over 10 years, the figure is 2.8%. So arguably, it hasn't really beaten inflation, and people investing in this could be very disappointed. Even the Vanguard SIPP is pants because you can't put employer contributions into it. You can only buy Vanguard products with the Vanguard SIPP, and as you can see in this table, for larger pots, it's not the cheapest, and things like Interactive Investor and AJ Bell are a better bet. Risk is also not understanding what you're invested in and not doing proper research before buying a fund. And that's why people can often benefit from portfolio coaching to help them guide them in these matters. The problem with Vanguard Lifestrategy, I'll use a car analogy. So your car needs to have a brake pedal, but you shouldn't drive with your foot permanently on the brake. So particularly if you're young and you're still accumulating funds, you don't necessarily need any bonds in your portfolio if you're not looking to sell anything in the next 10 years. One alternative to Vanguard Lifestrategy is the HSBC Global Strategy Dynamic Portfolio, which is actually an active fund, but there's not much trading that goes on. And it pretty much mimics a global tracker with a bit of bonds thrown in for good measure. We've got some global government bonds and some corporate bonds. I suppose the idea is that the managers can slightly tweak performance and exposures over time to get what they think will be optimal performance. One alternative is the BlackRock MyMap range, which have different numbers where 6 equates to their highest equity holding. This MyMap product also has exposure to small caps, and it also has exposure to commodities, and it doesn't have the excessive UK allocation of the Vanguard Lifestrategy range. This is a performance comparison of BlackRock MyMap against the equivalent Vanguard Lifestrategy product. And as you can see, BlackRock beats Vanguard across the board because Vanguard is pants. Fidelity also do a multi-asset range, and here are the holdings of their multi-asset allocator growth fund. The fees are reasonable, but the problem is really the excessive exposure to bonds. You can buy some investment trusts that are multi-asset, but these are active funds with reasonably high fees compared to their passive counterparts, and one of them, the Capital Gearing Trust, hasn't even beaten an overnight money market over the last 5 years. I think we're going to see a lot more innovation in the space of multi-asset funds, particularly if artificial intelligence becomes more pervasive in this area. And that's another reason why I think that Vanguard is pants, because they really don't do much innovation at all, and they even got rid of all of their factor exchange traded funds. You structure your portfolio around time buckets and when you're likely to access your money, then there's less need for a multi-asset fund. With a multi-asset fund, you'll have to sell equities and bonds at the exact same time, when in reality it's unlikely that both will have decent prices. Whereas if you've got several assets, such as separate equities fund, separate bond fund, maybe commodities, maybe infrastructure, you can sell whichever one of those you think has a decent price and best suits your investment goals. Global tracker will beat Vanguard Lifestrategy 100, as the latter has excessive exposure to the UK. And if you're interested in the other Vanguard Lifestrategy products, I recommend instead holding your bonds or commodities in a separate fund so that you can manage the exposure and the performance when you do your regular portfolio reviews. And if you want any help with that, you can contact me for portfolio coaching.